الحمد لله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وجعل الظلمات والنور ثم الذين كفروا بربهم يعدلون وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We seek Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we praise Him and we seek His blessings in this gathering, reflecting on His book in one of His houses. We seek beneficial knowledge. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to benefit what He has taught us, and may He teach us what benefits us. In our reflections on the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we did the ism, which is the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today, inshallah, we are going to focus on the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What is meant by sifa and how the sifa is related to the name, and how we can benefit by reflecting on the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will recall that when we did the names, we did the hadith of 99 names and said that this does not mean that there are only 99 names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that the names are more than that. Likewise, we will inshallah reflect on how many sifats, how many attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are there. But what is a sifa? What do we mean by an attribute? Remember, we gave the example of the snow. Snow is white. Snow is a name that has been given to this substance that comes down from the sky. And this is a name that humans have constructed in a certain language. In other languages, there are other names for the snow. The whiteness is the attribute of the thing that we have named snow. Name is different from the attribute of snow. Likewise, we name our children, we name other things. We said if we have a name, for example, of a human being, of a man whose name is Zaid, and Zaid is tall, the tallness of this human being is the sifa, is the attribute, just as the whiteness is the sifa of the snow. And then we say that Zaid is a scholar, Zaid is an alim. That's the second sifa. And then we say the snow, children go out and they make a snowman. So this is snow, but this snow is now a snowman. Is it possible that snow would be someday red or black? No, snow is always going to be white. This sifa of snow is an essential attribute of snow. We cannot conceive of snow without this sifa. However, the snowman can melt, go away. The tall man is tall. Zaid is tall. Is he always going to be tall? He is a scholar. Is he always going to be a scholar? Zaid is a beautiful reciter of the Qur'an, he is a Qari. Is he going to be always a Qari? So we differentiate between essential attributes that we cannot remove from the name and attributes which are transient, which can go away. The Zaid is an alim, he is a scholar, but maybe in old age he will lose his memory, maybe he will lose his mind, he will no more be a scholar. Likewise, he is tall, but we can assume this is something in between. He can always be tall, or something may happen and his legs are cut off and he is short now. Something can happen. How do we conceive attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not like anything that we know. He does not change. Nothing would ever decrease or increase in His being. It's not like snow or zaid. So what does it mean? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name is, we said, essential name is Allah, which contains all the attributes. And He's Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Al-Khaliq. There are attributes contained which are in addition to the name. So the difference between Asma Allah Ta'ala, the difference between the names of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and the Sifat is that in the Asma hiya kullu ma dalla ala zatillahi ma sifatil kamal al-qaima. The names of Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala are what point to His majesty, His being, along with all the sifats. When we say Allah, we conceive Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as being merciful, as being Khaliq, as being Alim. Everything is in the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Although there are specific names which point to one special aspect of His being. Like He's Al-Khaliq. Al-Khaliq is in addition to being Ar-Rahim, in addition to being a sustainer. Although there are names which are compound, they contain many attributes. So one name, for example, He is Al-Wahid, He is one. But it also means that He is Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad, that He didn't give birth to anyone and no one gave birth to Him. So His oneness contains the knowledge, the attribute of being uncreated. No one gave birth to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now on the other hand, Sifat, Sifat point to one or more attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they do not point to everything about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when we conceive a Sifa as Ar-Rahim, He is merciful, as Al-Khaliq, He is the creator, Badi'u Samawati wal Ard, He is the originator of the heavens and the earth, we are pointing towards one of the Sifats. As opposed to the names, the Sifats of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are innumerable. They are more than the names, because they point to His attributes, His qualities. How do we understand those sifats, and how do they help us to reflect on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and how do they benefit us? Number one, all the sifat that we know of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, just like the names, have to be transmitted. We cannot invent the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They have to be transmitted in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the Qur'an, in the Sunnah, or accepted by the ijma, by the overwhelming consensus of the scholars. Number two, some of the sifats, and this is going to be the main focus of today's class inshallah, some of the sifats, like His hand for example, His face, وَيَبْقَ وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ Surah Ar-Rahman, ayah number 27 says that His face is everlasting. يَبْقَ وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ بَلْ يَدَاهُ مَبْسُطَاتَانِ, that His hands are vast. أَكَلَّمَ اللَّهُ مُوسَى تَكْلِيمًا, and Allah spoke to Musa with speech. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ, and He is with you wherever you are. And He says, Ar-Rahman al-Arsh istawa. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Taha describes Himself that He is Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, al-Arsh istawa, that He is established on His throne. وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا هل ينظرون إلا يأتيهم الله في ظلال من الغمام والملائكة. Are they waiting for the day when when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will come to them. So the point that scholars make is that we do not derive names for certain sifats and we derive names from other sifats. He is merciful, so we say He is Ar-Rahman. But He will come, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا. Your Rabb, your Lord would come and the angels would come, but we do not say the name is the one who comes. We do not say the name from radiyallahu anhum wa radu anhum. We do not وَغَضِبَ alayhim wa la'anahu, that Allah His wrath is on them and His anger is on them. We do not derive the names of Maghdub for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the sifa of His ghadab. So, وَذَلِكَ بِأَنَّهُمْ مُتَّبَعُهُ مَا أَسْخَطَ اللَّهِ. So the sakhat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the hardship that comes to people, we do not derive the name of that Allah is the one who is hard. So some of the sifats are such that we do not derive the name يُخَادِعُونَ اللَّهَ وَهُوَ خَادِعُهُمْ. Many sifatul makr وَمَكَرَ اللَّهِ. They plotted and Allah plotted. We do not say Allah is the plotter as a name. This is the sifa. Now, how do we understand these attributes? This is not theoretical. This is essential for our iman. But at the same time, we have to understand the unfolding of the explanations in the Qur'an and the Sunnah in the historical context. When the Qur'an was being revealed, when the Prophet ﷺ was living among the companions, these ayahs came. But nobody went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, we just heard this new revelation that came which says, وَكَانَ أَرْشُهُ عَلَى الْمَاءِ وَهُوَ رَبُّ الْعَرْشِ الْعَظِيمِ. We just heard this from you, that His arsh was upon water, وَهُوَ رَبُّ الْعَرْشِ الْعَظِيمِ, and He is the Lord of the mighty throne. How is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala established on His throne? What does it mean? What does this revelation mean in reality? No one went to Him and asked these questions. These questions arose within the lifetime of the companions, though, after the passing away of the Prophet. Now, how do we know this, that this is the case? How do we know, how can we be certain that what we are saying is correct, that this never happened? We have a document by one of the Mamluk historian, Al-Makrizi. I'll mention more details about him in a while. But he says that had this been the case, then we would have some kind of sound or unsound reports. Just as we have reports in the Hadith literature that the Prophet ﷺ said so and so. Something, at least one report would be there which would say so and so went to the Prophet ﷺ and said, what does it mean that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has hands? What does it mean that He is established? We have nothing. So that's our proof. And we also have proof that after He passed away, alayhi salatu wassalam, these questions arose because we have from his wife, Ms. Salama radiallahu anha. She was asked about this ayah, وَكَانَ أَرْشُهُ عَلَى الْمَاءِ وَهُوَ رَبُّ الْعَرْشِ الْعَظِيمِ. What does it mean? And she said, قالت الاستواء غير مجهول والكيف غير معقول والإقرار به إيمان والجهود به كفر. This is the hadith that is in Sahih Bukhari, in which Sayyidah Salma radiallahu anha says that the Istawa, the establishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala upon His earth, غَيْرُ مَجْهُولٍ, is not unknown, it's not mubham, it's known. Well, kaifu, how of that is غَيْرُ مَعْقُولٍ. It's not right for any intellect to ponder about the kaif, about the modality. How is He established? غَيْرُ مَعْقُولٍ. This is not for the aql, it's beyond aql, beyond the intellect. Well, iqraru bihi iman, and the attestation that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is established on His throne is part of your iman. Well, jahudu bihi kufr, and if you are going to deny it, then that is kufr, that is disbelief. The attitude of the companions thus was not to investigate things about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala which cannot be investigated by the human intellect. Just don't go on that road. This particular attitude, we find it in many beautiful sayings. For example, we have from Sufyan bin Uyayna rahimullah, he says, كل ما وصف الله تعالى من نفسه في كتابه فتفسيره تلاوته والسكوت عليه. He said every single attribute with which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described Himself in His book, the explanation of that attribute is the tilawa, is the recitation. And then silence. وَالسَّكُوتُ عَلَيْهِ. Then you just reflect on what you just recited. What does it mean? You reflect it in your own beings. Now, he died in 198 Hijrah, 198 years. Imam Malik, rahimullah, was also asked about it. So we have these established traditions, and his response was the same as what we just heard. Ya Aba Abdul Rahman, al-Arsh istawa, kaifa istawa, kaifa istafa. He was asked, oh Ya Abdullah, Aba Abdullah ar-Rahman, that is his kunya, Imam Malik's kunya. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is established upon His earth, and how is it established? This report is just so beautiful. He said that فَتْرَكَ مَالِكُ فَأَخَذَتْهُ الرُّخْصَى ثُمَّ رَفَعَ رَأْسُهُ فَقَالَ الرَّحْمَنُ وَالْعَرْشُ اسْتَوَى كَمَا وَصَفَ بِهِ نَفْسَهُ وَلَا يُقَالُ كَيْفَ وَكَيْفَ عَنْهُ مَرْفُوعٌ وَمَا أَرَاكَ إِلَّا صَاحِبَ بِدْعَةٍ أَخْرِجُهُ. Imam Malik was giving his dars. One man stood up and said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is established on His throne. How is He established? He stopped his class, he went to the person, he took him and he raised his head towards the sky and he said, Ar-Rahman wal-Arsh istawa, kama wasafa bihi nafsi. He is established upon His throne as He has described Himself, and it's not right for you to say, yuqalu kaifa wa kaifa, how is He established? And then he said, you are creating a bid'ah, and then he took him out of the class. He said, get out of here. Salama radiallahu anha, she just described. A generation later, the situation has reached a stage where scholars are saying, don't go there. Because there are reasons for it, and those reasons are both political as well as of Iman. Therefore, we need to go a little bit into the why were people interested in finding out about this. And the political reasons are quite heart-wrenching, but we have this history, and it was foretold by the Prophet ﷺ. It was foretold. when he said that the best of people are those who are with me, and then those who would come after, and then those who would come after. So 3 generations were pointed out by the Prophet ﷺ, and we have another very beautiful insight into why this gate of political and then the disturbance in the solidity of the Iman came out. And also remember that much later, centuries later, this proverbial Iman of the old woman, when Razi was walking and people were very respectful, and women said, like, who is this? And they said, he's such a great scholar, he has 100 proofs for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And she said, he must have 100 doubts as well. And when that was reported to Imam Razi, he said, I wish I had the Iman of this old woman. She didn't have the need to undo the onion, layer after layer, find out inside. She just had the Iman, and we wish we have that same Iman. But we have questions, and those questions, I received a lot of questions about these issues, and they are genuine questions. We cannot say we just close the door, but we need to put those questions that we have, our children have, in the context. The fitna is to be understood in the sense of the radiance, the nur, the light of risala, the light of prophecy, the light of prophethood. When the Prophet ﷺ was walking, living on this earth, remember we did Hadith of Jibreel. Can you imagine being in Medina and the angels are coming? Jibreel alayhi salam is coming to teach your deen to you. We did that last time. The purification that happened to the hearts, that light was so intensely transformative that the aql, the intellect it was just brilliant. It was such brilliance that everything was lit up in their lives, in their beings. They had this understanding. When the light went away, it was preserved in the Qur'an and the Sunnah, but his presence was gone, alayhi salatu wassalam, and then it started to decrease. And now 1400 years later, we see tremendous amount of fasad of all kinds because that light is continuously decreasing. Although its concentrated form is preserved for everyone to have access to. Access is being reduced because we live in a world, our children grow up in a situation where they don't have the direct access to that light. Even the sources are not known. So that's why when the Prophet ﷺ was, he foretold this. We have a hadith in Sahih Bukhari, Haddasna Muhammad bin Bashar, Haddasna Ibn Abi Adi and Shoba. There is a long chain, it goes to An Huzaifa radiallahu anhu. He said that one day Sayyidina Umar asked, Ayyukum yahfazu qawla Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam fil fitna. Who among you remembers the saying of the Prophet ﷺ about the fitna, about the tribulations? فَقَالَ حُذَيْفَ أَنَا أَحْفَظُ كَمَا قَالَ. Sayyidina Huzaifa said, I remember. And Sayyidina Umar says, Hadi innaka la jari. Like, what's wrong with you? How bold are you? Like you are just, all these companions are sitting and you stand up and say, فَقَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. So say, okay, tell me what do you remember? He said, فِتْنَةُ الرَّجُلِ فِي أَهْلِهِ وَمَالِهِ وَجَارِهِ تُكَفِّرُهَا الصَّلَاةُ وَالصَّدَقَةُ وَالْأَمْرُ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَالنَّهْيُ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. So Sayyidina Huzaifa said that the tribulations of the mal, of the possessions, of your family, of your neighbor, and of leaving the prayer and not giving the sadaqah and not commanding the the maroof, the good, and not stopping the munkar. He said, no, I didn't ask about this. قال ليست هذه, I wasn't asking. ولكن لطيت موجك موج البحر. I was referring to the something that the Prophet told us about the fitna, the tribulations that will come wave after wave after wave. قال يا أمير المؤمنين لا بأس عليك منها إن بينك وبينها بابا مغلقا. He said, oh, the leader of the believers, don't worry about it, because you are the gate standing between those fitnas and the fitnas. قال يفتح الباب أو يكسر. He said, would this gate be opened or broken? He said, قال ذاك أخرى ألا يغلق قلنا علم الباب قال نعم قلنا عالم الباب قال نعم كما أن دون غد الليلة. He says this gate will be broken. And they said nobody had the courage to ask in that gathering what does it mean. And later on, وأمرنا مسروقا فسأله فقال من الباب قال عمر. So they went to Masruq, said, what did it mean? He said, it means that he will be martyred. The gate was Sayyidina Umar, and he will be martyred. The brokenness of the gate means that this was the forecast of the Prophet ﷺ. So he, ﷺ, left behind all these signs about it, and centuries later, all of these things, when they started to unfold, and we can see now how this is wave after wave of that fitna that the Prophet ﷺ mentioned. Al-Maqrizi, writing centuries later, he was in Cairo, and he attended Ibn Khaldun's classes when Ibn Khaldun came to visit Egypt during the Mamluk time. And he has left behind this huge history. He died in 845 Hijrah, so it's like eight centuries or 840 years after the Hijrah. And he's the one I mentioned that he said that we don't. In his history, which is a huge history, he has a chapter called Zikr al-Hal fi Aqaid al-Islam, from the beginning of Millat al-Islamiyah until the codification of the Ash'aris. And this is where he says that we don't have a single report going back to the companions in which they asked. Then we have this, remember the Hadith Jibreel, when we did that, there is a contextual preamble to the actual Hadith. Anyone remembers that? Before Imam Muslim starts the actual Hadith, there is a context in which the Hadith is mentioned. And the context is the وَكَانَ أَوَّلَ مَنْ كَانَ بِالْقَدْرِ فِي الْإِسْلَامِ. It says that the first who started to talk about the divine decree, Qadr, in Islam, was a certain man by the name of Ma'bad bin Khalid al-Jahani. And he said, Kana Jalisul Hasan bin al-Hussein al-Basri. He used to be in the circle of al-Hasan al-Basri rahmatullah in Basra. And he is the one who started this question about, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows everything. Does he know that Abu Jahl is not going to believe? And if he knows beforehand, then why would he punish him? Because Allah already knew he's not going to believe. When a sinner is going to commit sin, does Allah knows beforehand? What does Allah is alim? He is all-knower. We read it over and over in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He knows, he is alim, he knows everything. Does he know that this sinner is going to sin? And if yes, it has already been decreed. And if it has already been decreed, then why would he be punished? These are some of the questions that I received from you. Like these are real questions that our children or people are dealing with. And these questions arose in Basra, the first person, we even have the name of the first person. And then the hadith, the context of this hadith, the person who heard it, he and his companions, they say, what we do now? Let's go. Hajj is coming. We'll go to Hajj and maybe we'll see a companion of the Prophet ﷺ and we'll ask this question. In Basra, somebody is starting to talk about the preordained decree, the Qadr. These people who heard them, they say, we'll go for Hajj and maybe we'll find somebody. They go, and who they find there? The son of Sayyidina Umar. Sayyidina Umar is the one who is narrating the hadith of Jibreel. So they find his son there, and they ask him, they tell him this is what's happening in Basra. We have these discussions going on. And what does Sayyidina Umar say in that hadith of Jibreel that we did? He said, I have nothing to do with that person. Don't talk about it. I have nothing. And then he tells them the hadith of Jibreel. And the last of the part of the hadith of Jibreel is the iman on the qadr. Khayruhu wa sharruhu. Iman is completed with these 6 arkan in the hadith of Jibreel. The belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the books, the prophets, the angels. And the last one is the qadr. And again, we see the same attitude of the people. Now, why the political circumstances which started this they are also to be taken into consideration, because these things are not evolving in vacuum. These things are evolving in a real historical situation that is unfolding in the community. And the first of these is what happened in Medina in the time of Sayyidina Uthman. Can you imagine that this is Medina of the Prophet ﷺ, and this is the third of the Khulafa Rashidin, Sayyidina Uthman, and these people have come from Egypt and from other places like Basra and Kufa, most of them were Egyptians. And they are saying, you are not an upright leader because you haven't punished so-and-so who was drinking. Because so-and-so is plundering the state treasury and you don't punish them. Because you appointed so-and-so and he's your relative. And they just gather around the house. All the companions are there. And nobody even can imagine what's going to happen to him. And these people become more and more violent as the days progress, day after day. When the danger increases, some of the companions, they go and they stand as guards to the house. But qadar is qadar. The Prophet ﷺ had foretold what's going to happen to these companions. He's shaheed. He's a martyr in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing is going to prevent that. So he is martyred in his own home. Then the fitna starts about the justice of this martyrdom. Who comes next? As Khalifa is Sayyidina Ali. And then the demand for this justice for this crime that was committed starts to become louder and louder. Who is there who is going to find exactly who is the person who has gone in to do this? Justice itself needs its own procedure to take place. But then, the clouding happens. This is the fitna. This is the tribulation where these companions about whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that He put love in their hearts. And it says to the Prophet ﷺ, had you spent the entire treasures of this earth, you would not have been able to put this love in the hearts of these companions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, it is because He did the love. That love is clouded now. So what one companion is seeing in one way, another companion is seeing in another way. The cloud has come. Sayyidina Aisha herself, she repented later on. Like she says, no, we have to fight, we have to go. Like this clouding happened, then the battle of Jamal happened. And then there is the conflict about who is the rightful Khalifa now, because Sayyidina Muawiyah says, well, I am the inheritor, I belong to the tribe, to the clan of Uthman, and I have the right to take revenge for his killing, for his martyrdom. So all of these things are known in our history. The question that we have now is in relation to the sifats of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in relation to Iman. So the one who killed Sayyidina Usman, were they Muslims or not? How are we going to treat a sinner who does killing, who does all the sins? Is he a Muslim or not? There is a difference of opinion that emerges. Some scholars then say, well, I don't know. I'm just going to leave this question. This is between him and the Creator. I cannot decide these things. Others say, no, we have to decide, because how are you going to rule if you cannot decide that this is a person who has gone outside the pale of Islam? We still have the same situation even in our time. How are we going to, because you have to get married, you have to do transactions, you have a legal status within the state, either as a Muslim or as a non-Muslim. You cannot marry a non-Muslim if the person is declared non-Muslim because he stole, because he killed someone, so at what time a person goes out of the pale of Islam and then has to be treated legally in that particular status? These questions became very real, and the question of Qadr remained central to this, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained Qadr, and because this question is connected with the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If he knows beforehand, what does it mean that he would still punish those who are doing this? Because if he is the one, he knows, that means it has been decreed. So this question, which is a very old human question, whether what we are doing, what happens to us, was already written for us. The risk that we are receiving, are we earning it, or was it already precisely determined for us? This is the amount you are going to receive, whether you earn or not. If we are not going to earn anything, then what? What does human effort, what is the action, the human action, what is the status of the human action? We have then the emergence of scholars, and this is beautiful because these questions were not left unattended. 3 centuries of intense scholarly effort would then produce codification of all the questions and all the answers. And these questions and answers are now a beautiful asset to the Ummah. But the difficulty is that when we start now to discuss those or understand those, we say, oh, this is the position of the Mu'tazila, this is the position of the Ash'ari. I don't want to go into those, I just want to be a simple Muslim. So don't please get me into. That's fine. If you don't have those questions, if you have the Iman of the old woman from the village, you don't need to understand those. But if you, your children, your friends, people are asking, well, you are a Muslim, tell me, but this person just killed me, is he still a Muslim or not? Can I marry my daughter to him or not? Or can I do transactions? So these questions then are codified in our tradition, along with the entire history of how they were codified. What are the principles which were used? I sent that PDF that I made for the one particular codification of these questions, and let's just quickly go there because we want to remain focused uh, on the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These are sub branches of scholarship on the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We can go into as much detail. We can spend our entire life, for example, in this field, if that is our chosen field. But we want to, so in the codification that and in the aqaid that we did before, Imam Tahawi's Aqidah Tahawiyah we did, all the sifats mentioned in the Qur'an were classified into 5 main categories. The first one, al-sifat al-nafsiyah, al-sifat al-zat. This is the essential attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is His wujud, and there is only one sifa in this, and that is His existence, His wujud. That is one category. The second, they are called as-sifat al-salbiyah. These are transcendental attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that these eternity, permanence, dissimilarity from creation, self-subsistence and unicity. These are the characteristics which are not of any other being conceivable other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He alone is eternal. He alone is everlasting. He alone is mukhalifa lil hawadis, unlike anything else. He alone is qiyam bil nafs. He does not need anyone for his existence. Everything else needs something else for his existence. And He alone is this unique wahdaniya. He is the one. So this is the second category of 5 sifat al-salbiya, 5 transcendental attributes, no one else. Then there is the third category of sifat al-ma'ani, conceptual attributes. These are 7: life, hayat, knowledge, ilm, will, arada, qudra, sama, basar and kalam. These are the 7 attributes of conceptual attributes. And then there are 7 attributes of qualification which are the active participles of these 5. Yani, He has life. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has life. He is haya. That means He is living. So from life, living. From knowledge, knowing. From will, volitional. From qudra, He is qadir. He can do everything. From the attribute of He is Samiul Alim, He is the hearing, He is the seeing, and He is the speaking. So these are the 7 attributes. Then we have the 5th category, the opposites of these necessary attributes. Like all of these are impossible for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning, we said that He has existence. Meaning, He cannot have non-existence. We say that He is eternal in both directions of pre-eternity and post-eternity. Meaning, kidam wa baqa. Yani He was always and He would always be. Which means hadus is inconceivable. Hadus is when something comes into existence in time. Something happens in time. It's inconceivable for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have that quality. Likewise, every opposite of these 13 attributes, like he has speech, it's impossible to conceive of Him as speechless. Speechlessness is not possible. He sees, therefore, blindness is impossible. So this is a scheme of structured understanding of the sifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and how they came to be. I will end with one particular approach to this whole question. We have distinct categories of scholars who have dealt with this issue of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some are theorists who use the logic, the mantiq, the logical arguments to come and drive and say this is the position. Then we have philosophers who use the tools of philosophy to come to terms. Then we have a category of scholars who say this is just too much intellectualization, stop it. You are never, never, ever going to reach the goal, which is to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to actually have a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are here just to do ibadah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Just forget about all of this intellectual stuff going in your head. This is not the right way to do it. They say, no matter how sharp your intellect is, just don't, you are never going to reach an understanding of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The only way that is possible for human beings is if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows you who He is. And for that, just polish your heart, clean it from all the things which tarnish your sight from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you will receive something which is only a light, which will just brighten everything for you, and you will just go above these questions, just as the companion said. This approach, this particular approach, is not just empty words. It has its own stages. You in the examination, it's all codified. You go through it, and one of these is, and we have books on those, and one of these is this book here. This is Ali Usman Hujweri, who was sent by his Sheikh to Lahore, and he came to a place which was 7 minutes walking distance from where I grew up. And I used to go to his place where he's buried. And this is one of the first books on the Tasawwuf in Persian. It was Persian language at that time. He was sent there, which has a beautiful passage with which I want to end this session, inshallah. He has a chapter called Kashful Hijab, the unveiling of the hijab, unveiling of the heart. And he says, Ma qadarullah haqqa qadrihi, wa qala Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, law araftumullaha haqqa ma'arfatihi, la machaytum al-bakhur wa zarat bidu'aikum al-jibal. If you really knew Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you had the gnosis, then you will be like those who can walk on the oceans, and the mountains will move. And he says that, he quotes Sayyidina Ali, who said that, I knew my Rabb with the light, Machun Amir al-Mu'minin alayhi, Rabb Parsidan is Ma'rifat Guftu. He said, Araftullaha billahi wa araftu ma'dunallahi binurillah. Khudamand ra azza wa jal budu shanakhtam wa juz khudamand ra binuri aw shanakhtam. He translates in Ali's saying in Persian. The English is Araftullaha billahi. I knew Allah by Allah. Wa araftu ma'dunallahi binurillah. And I knew everything other than Allah by the light of Allah. So he says, Muhal bashid ke dil ra zinda kunand. It is impossible for the heart to be a living heart without this light that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cast on the one who is seeking his light. As he said, is one who was dead and to whom we gave life and for whom we made a light to walk by among mankind, humankind, similar to the one who is as if he were in a darkness from which he cannot escape. This is the ayah 122nd of Surah Al-An'am. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْ أَنَّنَا نَزَّلْنَا إِلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةَ وَكَلَّمَهُمُ الْمَوْتَ وَحَشَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ قُبُلًا مَا كَانُوا لِيُؤْمِنُوا إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَهُمْ يَجْهَلُونَ. Ayah 111 of Surah Al-An'am says, وَلَوْ أَنَّنَا نَزَّلْنَا إِلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةَ وَكَلَّمَهُمُ الْمَوْتَ وَحَشَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ قُبُلًا مَا كَانُوا لِيُؤْمِنُوا. Even if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had sent down angels upon them who talked to them and He would have shown them the resurrection of the dead and He would have brought everything before them, they wouldn't believe except if Allah wills. And He says that وَبَاطِلَ اسْتَيْنَ قَوْلٍ, because this saying that you can reach Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with your intellect is batil, is not true, is false, because iblis ke वही आयात बसियार दीद व बहिश्त व दोज़ख व अर्श व कुर्सी व रोयत anha वीरा इल्लत मारिफत नमानत. Iblis knew everything. He saw the dozakh, he saw the Jannah, he saw everything, but he didn't get the marifah. He didn't get the right thing because he used his intellect. He didn't have the light in his heart. So he says, and then he quotes وَلَوْ أَنَّنَا نَزَّلْنَا, this ayah, then he quotes. So he says, अगर मैं फरिश्तगान रा भी कुफ़ार फरिश्तम तब ईशान सुखन करनी. If the angels were not even able to do this, how are you going to do it, human beings? So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Nicholson translated this Kashf Mahjoob, his English translation is okay. So inshallah we stop here because we want to have questions.
Isn't it a little confusing that we do need to ask and we shouldn't ask? Like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us intellect, and still if we have to believe as is without asking, then what's the point of giving intellect?
The answer that our scholars have given is to not ask, but to determine the sphere of the functioning of the intellect. But Al-Yusuf Manujwari, Rahmatullah, is saying what other scholars have said, what Imam Malik said, what Sayyidah Salama said, all of them are saying that there are things beyond the reach of the intellect, and there are things which are within the reach of intellect, and intellect points to realities beyond its own comprehension, where it needs to become silent, where we cannot follow the intellect anymore. And Rumi also, to some extent Iqbal, both of them, when they describe these journeys, these are not just empty words. Rumi was someone who traveled that road. Iqbal followed him as well. So when they say that when this is the mirage of the Prophet ﷺ, that was in the human domain, if you see how these journeys, the imaginary journeys of Rumi describes in the Masnavi or Iqbal describes, these are patterned on the journey, mirage journey. When the seventh heaven is reached, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell us in Surah Al-Qamar? That he saw what he saw. Mazag al-Basru forgetting the ayah. Mazag al-Basru. Bismillah. Makadzab al-Fuad. His heart did not lie, and his eyes saw what they saw. And the explanation is that it wasn't the vision of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it wasn't the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there is a limit to human reach. Within those limits, the intellect has its function. It has its function. And when we, inshallah, start the next section on the theme of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being Al-Khaliq, we start that, inshallah, next Sunday. One of the sifats, one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He is Al-Khaliq. And this is the theme that the scholars have said is the vastest domain for the human intellect to go into this ocean as far as you can. There is no limitation, there is no prohibition. The sifa of Al-Khaliq, the sifa, the attribute of creation is af'al, is the fail, is the action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't refer to His Dhat. It's the action, attribute of action, fail. All the af'al of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are in one category of the sifat, of the attributes. So inshallah, when we go into the details of the attribute of creation, next time we start that, we'll see how intellect is actually needed to see what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created.
So in extension, like it's part of our iman to believe in unseen. And like you mentioned the narration of Hazrat Anha, she defined a limit, don't go there. Are there limits defined in Qur'an and Sunnah or later tradition where we are supposed to go and where we are not supposed to go?
Yes. We mentioned some of those limits in the previous two classes in terms of the Dhat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These sifat likewise have been categorized into the sifat which are attached to the Dhat. I just mentioned the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. His face, وَيَبْقَى رَبُّكَ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that his face will remain forever. Yabqa. And this is so he mentions, and if we start asking how is it possible, kaifa, modality of that yabqa, that's off the limits. The belief is that, and the safest, because it can really take people outside Islam, outside Iman. This is very dangerous. And then there are books which actually have details of if you go that far, then you have gone out of Islam. It's so dangerous. So when they did this, it was a very serious undertaking, because to leave Islam just because your intellect wants to get to that place where you want to see why.
It's a slippery slope.
It's very slippery slope. But that does not, you see, the other extreme is not to say